Hello class, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have notes for Chapter 6, Section 4, The Rise of Christianity. As we begin, make sure you have your guided note packet handy and fill in the information that you need. I may be also giving you a few additional little tidbits here and there, so please make sure you're listening. So here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire. I'm going to erase everything here and then I'm going to mention a few things. Um, One of the things that we really know about Christianity is that it's heavily rooted in Judaism. And about the time that Christ was born, in Judaism, we had the rise of a group known as the Zealots. The Zealots were a very traditional group of people, um, those who really were um, concerned about the rules that you might find within the Old Testament. And anyway, these zealots were very vocal about their desire to overthrow Roman rule. Many Jews, unlike other conquered Romans, refused to abandon their religion for the polytheistic religions of the Roman Empire. And we know a few things about our Romans. In the past, we had talked about the fact that the Romans um, had a tendency to allow their people to have a certain amount of freedom or sovereignty so that they wouldn't rebel. And for the most part, the Romans were very tolerant of the differing religious practices that you might have found throughout their empire. And perhaps that maybe allowed for our Jews to continue their practices and to be very, very concerned about the traditions that they upheld. So, going on. The keys of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth is that the people must repent and seek forgiveness. God, love God above all else, to love others as you love themselves, the value of humility, mercy, and charity. Authorities arrested Jesus and sentenced him to death because of his popularity, and they were fearful that there would be some type of political uprising. We know that Jesus, obviously, when the people came in contact with him, they were very moved. And I think there was great fear that Jesus was perhaps maybe becoming more of a political figure than that of just a spiritual leader. And the Romans, I think, for the most part, were willing to listen to the zealots and perhaps go ahead and um, participate within the crucifixion of Christ. Many of the disciples, or those apostles and followers of Christ, worked to spread the message of Jesus despite the danger because they believed in the importance of Jesus' teachings, and they may have thought that their deaths would inspire others. The whole concept of a martyr. And you have to remember, a lot of our early members of the church, primarily our 12 apostles, died martyrs' deaths. Okay, and that was great inspiration for many to continue to follow their teachings. And speaking of teachings, we've got to talk about St. Paul. I think you all remember that St. Paul, aka Saul, had started off as a great persecutor within the Christian church, and on his road to Emmaus, had a great conversion. And eventually, we have the rise of a man named Paul. And Paul would be probably known as one of the great converters. He traveled throughout the Mediterranean and spread the gospel and taught many peoples of the ways of Christ. And some people within the Jewish community, and maybe even some of those earliest Christians, might have even questioned Paul because of the fact that, he, unlike, like St. Peter, St. Paul basically said that you could kind of dispense with some of the Jewish traditions and customs, many of the customs that were dealing with the issues of food, um, and allow those people who were perhaps maybe pagans who had been converted, to not necessarily convert to Judaism first and just become Christians. And at a time, there would be a little, division between Paul and Peter over some of the early teachings, and eventually the church is going to have um, to deal with this debate. And this is something that you probably have talked about in your religion classes with Father. So St. Paul was able to make Christianity a universal religion because he dispensed of some of those Jewish customs, the food prohibitions, and he was able to ease the bringing in of non-Jews into the faith. We mentioned a moment ago that the Romans did have a tradition of religious tolerance, and this allowed for the spread of Christianity throughout the Middle East. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, eventually many of our Roman leaders are going to start having kind of a change of heart. I think many of you recall that many of our early Christian martyrs died very brutal deaths, many of them dying in places like the Colosseum at the hands of gladiators, or worse yet, the victims of being slain by animals. Around AD 313, Emperor Constantine issued a very important decree of the Roman Empire known as the Edict of Milan, which made Christianity legal within the Roman Empire. So no longer are we going to have to worry about Christians being thrown to the lions. And what's interesting is Emperor Constantine is going to also have kind of a change of heart. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that as we continue on here. A little later, in AD 391, Emperor Theodosius ended the practice of polytheism. If you remember, the Greek and the Roman gods, this has now all been put to rest. And so any non-Christian religious ceremonies were now banned. So in a sense, this allows for kind of the rise of the Christian tradition in parts of Western Europe. All right, thank you very much.